Mm, Marriage, people can be big fans of marriage. People can be indifferent about marriage. Marriage can be a business transaction. Marriage can be amazing, horrible, scary, soul fulfilling, all in the same day. And our spouses that come along with marriage, because, marriage is the joining of two people. What we've known over the past few years is that marriage is really looking a lot different. As financial professionals, how do you talk about this with your clients? So, again, I think it's great that we start off with a little bit of context, but please feel free and just chime in because it's a small group today. So feel free to unmute yourselves and just ask questions as we go along. How does that sound? Good?
Perfect.
Right. So what we do know right now is that the number of marriages that were registered within 2020, so the number of people being married in Canada in 2020 was a third, one third lower than it was in the previous year. So why are people not getting married? So the trends are telling us that people are waiting longer to get married. So the average age of a Canadian getting married is around 30, 33. Okay. It coincides with the time that they leave home. And so that actually makes sense from a cultural context because many Asian cultures and many other non white families, uh, children stay in the house longer than normal, than, say, other children. They typically are leaving the home, getting married, then having babies. So our cultural demographics are shifting a bit. And so the people are getting married later, as I said. Now, the highest rate of divorce in Canada is between the 40 to 60 or even over 60 category. And what is happening is these are people that may have stayed together for financial reasons or because their children needed them in the home. So they wanted to get their children successfully launched. So they stayed in the marriage, or they didn't know that they could leave, or there was social or community stigmatism around divorce. So, marriage and divorce and what we do is really one of these very delicate tightrope conversations because everyone has an opinion. And as financial services professionals, we need to have a real good foundation of trust with our clients before we can start asking these questions. Like, how do you ask your client, how's your marriage? Really, that financial services professional will want to know the quality of your relationship because it's going to impact the decisions you make with your money, how you spend it, how you save it, and everything in between. So, there's kind of three states, I think, with marriage. You're planning on getting married, you're going to keep on being married, or you want out. And these are sort of the three big things financial services professionals are going to want to know. Because getting married, there's a whole, what happens when you get married? You become a unit. So is there going to be commingling of assets? So what are the legal ramifications? Do you want to even commingle your assets, to build on something? Have your financial objectives changed? Because as a single person, you were just saving for retirement or a fabulous vacation or sabbatical. But now you have somebody else in your life, and those realities may not be yours anymore, or may not be the primary objectives you have, because it could be about building a life with somebody, whether it's buying a house or a motor home, or, things can change quickly. So we need to learn how to ask, like, are you planning on having a serious relationship with somebody? Because then you need to find out if they're living together or not. Because, we live in a country that has common law, right? So there's financial impacts to that as well, with your clients merely cohabitating, which a lot of young people are doing today, because the whole pomp and circumstance of marriage, the whole ceremony behind it, can be a lot emotionally, a lot financially. Helping your clients plan for that is one thing, but I think everyone on this call has been married at least once, right? So what happens when you stay in a marriage that you're not happy in? So when you're unhappily married, your spending habits may or may not change. Like, because how are you coping with the stress of staying in a marriage that doesn't make you happy? We saw this during COVID. We saw a dramatic spike of intimate partner violence during COVID. And in fact, there are some small towns in Ontario that are declaring like states of emergency because the instances of intimate partner violence is so high. There is a financial cost to all of the parties involved. And as a financial advisor and financial services professionals, you need to be aware of that, because there's legal costs, health care, certainly mental health care. And what about the children, if there are, or any other dependent? Because we also live in a world where, we have what we now call the sandwich generation, where there's a whole group of women that are looking after their elderly parents while raising grandchildren. It's not uncommon to see people raising grandchildren and looking after adult children, because we don't have the public supports to help these people. We all hold different ideas and value judgments around marriage. So, getting back to being in financial services and why you need to care, right now on the KYC, what does it ask you about this topic?
Well, you just have to fill in a radio button. Isn't
So
that
what are
right?
your options?
Oh, well, I know you have to choose a, uh, Mr., Miss, Mrs.
So you identify who your spouse is, right? But basically the question is, are you
Are
married?
you? Yeah,
Yes or no?
yeah.
So, Sean, are you married? And what would your response be, Sean?
Hi, everyone. My response would be I am technically married, but I am separated.
Hmm. So the answer, although we were looking for a yes or a no, Sean gave us a really interesting piece of information, because he said technically yes, but no. So Sean has said there is a breakdown in the marriage, but they haven't ended it fully. So what are the financial implications around this? So as a financial advisor, what would the questions you would want to know? So if we're asking, just straight asking, you're going to want to know if Sean or his wife is paying support to one or another? Is Sean still residing within the family home? Because real estate is really expensive and rent is really expensive in this city. So oftentimes we will find married couples cohabitating in the same spaces, but leading separate lives. And this is important to know because they're not working towards the same common goals they were as as a married couple. They now have separate and unique objectives that no longer are commingled or dependent on each other. Right. And so, how do you even start having that conversation? So, tell me all about your marriage and what it looks like and how it functions. Awkward.
Yeah, it's a bit much.
So, tell me about your family. So now we're not asking a question because sometimes when we put people, like when we ask questions, we put them on the spot. Tell me about your marriage. Tell me about your relationship. So when you ask somebody to describe or tell you about their life, they then have to think about it differently because they're creating a narrative in their head. They're not answering a question. So there's actually a bit of a different function happening, right? And so how we choose to respond, not only we talked about this last week when we talked about tone and judgment and kind of creating safe spaces, but when we ask things or present things differently, because I'm not asking, I'm like, hey, I'm inviting you, collaborative, warm, open. I'm inviting you to share what your marriage and your relationship is like. So Jenny B, tell me about your marriage. You
I
don't have.
think,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think as an advisor, I would might frame it a little differently. Not
Okay.
tell me about your marriage, but maybe tell me, be more specific in terms of tell me about how you handle your finances.
Right. And it might look like, tell me how you and your partner handle money.
A little less intrusive, maybe,
Yeah,
because you're with a financial professional. That's their job to hear the answer to that question.
right? But don't discount asking the approach of, tell me about your marriage, tell me about your relationship. Because when you leave it open like that, without narrowing the focus of the financial piece, which you certainly can do, especially when you're dealing with new clients, you just want them to talk and to share. Because this is about building a relationship. So when you invite them to give you that information, you don't know what's going to come out of it because so tell me about your relationship. Oh, um my spouse is lovely and they're kind and they're warm and they're caring and they're funny. Um and they work really hard. They're a successful whatever and they're telling you about it. But then you find out when you ask about the relationship, right? So you're asking about the marriage and the person. And then the relationship is different because the relationship is how the two of you function together. And it's through learning the relationship that things like, well, my spouse actually uses a wheelchair 50% of the time. So tell me. So inviting your clients to share is a good way to go. You know your clients are going to divorce. Getting rid of one of the clients is probably the way to go. But remember that they are both your clients and you need to do the best by them, regardless of the behavior. And sometimes that means not doing things. So if one spouse is trying to act in a retaliatory manner, trying to hide funds, obfuscate the truth of holdings, changing beneficiary information without the other, like you need to act in good faith here to both clients. And so, if there is a breakdown in marriage, you need to have a conversation with both clients and say, you know, I'm here to help this go through, but one is going. But you need to help them both equally because you cannot have that propriety or have that smell of being pulling favorites. So, how can I help you? How can we move this forward amicably? And the client, we are coming to the end of this week's session, and oh, does it go by quickly? I want to thank you for joining me again. And what are we doing next week? Oh, I think we are actually going to talk about something super, super interesting. Not that marriage isn't super interesting, but and MAID is, for those of you who may not know what MAID is the right to die legislation and helping people pass on when their quality of life isn't so hot. And there's huge emotional and financial impacts around using MAID as an option. So have yourselves a great week, and we will see you next week.